The movie begins with the janitor doing his cleaning duties at school. Suddenly, he hears a commotion nearby and takes out his flashlight, nervously asking, "Who's there?" Curious and concerned, he walks towards the sound and enters a classroom. He finds a scared female student. Deciding to seek help, he hurries through the corridors. In the meantime, another female student, her hands smeared with blood, approaches him urgently and directs him to run. Weeks earlier, Riley is a high school senior starting her first day at a new school, along with her father, Chris, the school's newest English teacher. Kyla, an outcast and aspiring photographer, discreetly takes some snapshots for the yearbook. Trisha, a popular student, demands that Kyla take flattering pictures of her and her friends, mocking Kyla's appearance in the process. Later, Trisha notices Chris and boldly claims that she will win him over. During his first lesson, Riley, Trisha, and Kyla find themselves in the same class with Chris. After class, Kyla engages Riley in conversation, finding common ground in their shared love for the arts. Before parting ways, Kyla subtly gathers the information she seeks, learning that Riley is Chris's daughter. Kyla asks to come over to Riley's house for a study session, and Riley happily agrees. Later, from a distance, Kyla discreetly observes Chris, taking snapshots as she keeps a watchful eye on the situation. As Chris arrives home, Riley happily shares about her newfound friends, mentioning Kyla. Meanwhile, the photographer daughter returns home to find her mother, Jess, acting unusually. Jess has been exercising more and has even purchased a new dress. The daughter jumps to the conclusion that her mother might be seeing someone. Jess confirms her suspicions, admitting they met at a grocery store, but she keeps the details a secret for now. That evening, Kyla envisions a scenario where Chris and she share a close, intimate moment in her room. The next day, Riley invites Kyla over to their place to deepen their friendship. During their conversation, Riley tells Kyla about her mother's infidelity, which led to her parents' divorce. Kyla mentions her desire for a more mature partner, to which Riley playfully remarks that finding such a person in high school is a challenge. In a moment of distraction, the new acquaintance excuses herself to use the bathroom, providing Kyla with an opportunity. Seizing the chance, she quietly sneaks into Chris's bedroom and gently touches his bedsheet, all the while ensuring her friend remains oblivious to her actions. The following day in English class, Kyla can't take her eyes off Chris, observing his every move. Meanwhile, Trisha tries various small gestures to capture his attention. After class, Trisha approaches Riley with a surprising revelation. Their teacher is the father of the new student. Commenting on the unusual situation, Trisha wonders why Kyla hangs out with Riley, the first person the photographer has approached. Curious, Trisha asks for Kyla's phone number, which she innocently provides, unaware of Kyla's angry gaze. Later, the photographer confronts Riley aggressively, warning Riley that Trisha is dangerous and she's after her father. Kyla claims Trisha has a history of messing around with teachers, as she had slept with a history teacher the prior year, sharing this out of genuine concern for her friend. The next day, Kyla calls Riley to inquire about Chris. Riley reassures her that there's nothing to worry about, as her father isn't the type to act inappropriately. He is in fact dating someone he met at a grocery store. Panic sets in for Kyla as she remembers her mom's story and realizes Jess is getting ready for a date. She hastily hangs up and answers the doorbell, finding Chris with a bouquet for Jess. After a brief introduction, Jess sweetly accepts the flowers from Chris. Kyla, filled with jealousy, decides to sabotage their date by spilling water on Chris, intentionally framing it as an accident. Concerned about the potential delay, Chris suggests they stay there for their date, a proposal readily accepted by Jess, oblivious to her daughter's hidden motives. Throughout dinner, the adults enjoy their time together. Later, Kyla excuses herself and retreats to her room, scheming for another way to sabotage her mom's date. As the evening progresses and the adults grow closer, Kyla's sudden cries interrupt their intimacy. She dashes downstairs in her pajamas, claiming she saw a man outside her window. Concerned, Chris checks the area, finding no one while Kyla pretends to be terrified in front of her mom. The following morning at school, Kyla treats Riley in a distant manner. When asked about her behavior, Kyla blames her friend for hanging out with Trisha, despite her warnings about Trisha using her to get to her father. Riley tells her that Trisha claims it wasn't her who had slept with their history teacher, but Kyla herself. Kyla denies the accusation, and Riley leaves. Later, Kyla confronts Trisha, threatening her to leave Riley alone, but Trisha refuses to back down. The next day, Kyla takes provocative pictures of herself. At school, as Riley approaches her to apologize, Kyla, having filled her locker with lewd photos she had taken of herself the night before, accidentally opens her locker, which causes the printed pictures to fall out and create a scene. Kyla walks away but heads to Chris's classroom to tell him she is being harassed, and he promises to help find whoever is responsible. Riley follows her friend and witnesses the interaction. Kyla and Riley eventually make amends, and Kyla confesses to having slept with her history teacher, claiming he had manipulated her. Later that day, Chris offers Kyla a ride and she accepts. As they reach Jess's home, the photographer pretends to take photos for the yearbook, but is secretly storing pictures of him for herself. Later that night, as Chris and Jess prepare for a date, Kyla, posing as Trisha, sends sexually suggestive messages to Chris's phone. Kyla subtly suggests her mother read the text sent by the alleged Trisha. Reluctantly, Jess reads the messages and discovers their inappropriate nature, leading her to believe Chris is having sex with one of his students. A confrontation ensues when Chris returns from the bathroom, and Kyla listens from another room. Realizing his true colors, Jess demands he leave her house. As Chris sits in his truck, Kyla enters and surprises him by initiating an intimate encounter, seducing him into kissing her. The teacher, taken aback, does not reciprocate, and Kyla departs, leaving him speechless and alone. Upon returning to her room, Kyla grabs another phone she previously used to message Chris while pretending to be Trisha. She decides to dispose of the phone to eliminate any evidence. The next day, in class, Trisha attempts to seduce Chris again, but Kyla intervenes dramatically by returning Chris's clothes that he supposedly left at her house. The classroom witnesses this scene and Riley watches everything unfold. Shortly after, the police arrive in the classroom and take Trisha away, having found the phone used to text Chris the sexually suggestive messages, as well as containing the lewd photos of Kyla in her locker. After class, surprisingly, she kisses the teacher before leaving, making Chris feel disgusted. Later, Riley approaches Kyla saying that the police must have found something on Trisha and wonders what they'll do to her. But Kyla dismisses her friend's concern by saying it's not their problem. That night at Riley's birthday party, Kyla sneaks into Chris's office and attempts to be intimate with him. He resists at first, but eventually gives in. Their moment is abruptly interrupted when Riley walks in on them. She then runs away and distraught. Amidst the lively party, Chris steps outside to find his daughter. They come face to face, and their tense exchange catches the attention of everyone around. Inside, Chris seeks his keys but is stopped by Kyla. Kyla suggests continuing where they left off since everyone else has left the party. However, Chris is determined to find his daughter. This leaves Kyla angered, questioning if Riley means more to Chris than she does. The next day, Jess receives a message from Riley indicating they need to talk. After class ends, everyone departs except Kyla, who stays to argue with Chris about his distant behavior. Suddenly, Jess storms into the room to confront Chris, having been told everything by Riley. Jess forcefully slaps the man, commanding her daughter to leave. Riley observes the scene with disappointment. As Jess takes Kyla away, she confronts her daughter, deeming her actions inappropriate, but Kyla defends herself, denying any wrongdoing. She states that she is of legal age and claims Chris and her are in love. Jess finally realizes that the pictures and schemes were all Kyla's doing. Undeterred, Kyla tells her mother to stay out of it. Desperate to reach Chris, Kyla repeatedly calls him, but he doesn't answer. Riley approaches her father for a serious talk, where he admits to being broken after what Jess did, almost losing his daughter. He sincerely apologizes and vows he will not see Kyla anymore to keep Riley with him, and Riley forgives him. The next day, Kyla calls Trisha and asks to meet her before school. When Trisha arrives, Kyla admits to framing her and harms herself by breaking her fingers. As Riley and Chris arrive, Kyla cries for help, claiming Trisha attacked her. Trisha is arrested and Kyla goes to the hospital, and she revels in having Chris by her side. At the hospital, she uses the incident to convince Jess that Trisha is targeting her. Though Jess accepts this, she makes Kyla promise not to see Chris anymore. As Chris and Riley arrive, Kyla pleads with her mother to bid farewell to him. Instead, Riley steps up, clarifying that the events made her father realize he needs help coping and she will support him. Riley tells Kyla that her relationship with her father is over, and Kyla appears to agree. She asks Riley to take over her yearbook responsibilities for a volleyball game that night, which Riley reluctantly accepts. When Riley leaves, Kyla tells Chris they can finally be together with Trisha gone, but Chris denies her, telling her their relationship is over and to leave him alone. Kyla declares she will never leave Chris and reminds him he will have to see her every day in class. Chris decides to quit his job to get away from her and leaves to gather his belongings from the classroom. Left alone, Kyla's gaze falls on a scalpel left at her bedside, which she takes and leaves the hospital. Meanwhile, the teacher drives to school and sends a voice message to his daughter, asking her to meet in his classroom for an important conversation. Shortly after receiving the message, Riley finds herself in a dimly lit school hallway as Jess frantically realizes her daughter is missing. At the school that evening, Kyla confronts Riley, declaring only one of them can be in Chris's life, and stabs her in the stomach with the scalpel. Making her way to Chris's class, she holds the scalpel to his throat, telling him they are meant to be together, and also revealing she was the one that had manipulated her previous teacher, not vice versa. Chris vehemently denies any feelings for her, enraging Kyla further. Meanwhile, Riley crawls desperately towards her father's classroom. Kyla proposes starting a new family with Chris, offering to bear him a child, since Riley apparently doesn't fit into their plans. Chris manages to escape Kyla's grasp by shoving her over his desk and demands to know where his daughter is. But Kyla retaliates by tripping him, which causes him to stumble and hit his head on a nearby table. Chris is rendered unconscious, and Kyla is horrified at what had happened. Back to the scene from the beginning of the film, the janitor hears the commotion and stumbles upon Kyla, who pretends to be injured and asks him to get help. As the janitor runs to find assistance, Riley, alive but badly wounded, musters up her strength and rises, warning the janitor to run. But Kyla was following him from behind, slitting the man's throat with the scalpel. Riley seizes the opportunity to flee. Kyla then chases Riley to the school's dark room, cornering her and venomously claiming that only one of them could have Chris and that one of them is destined to die. Riley is able to disarm Kyla with a tray, leading Kyla to attempt to kill Riley by strangling her with her camera strap. Before she could succeed, however, Riley manages to break free by striking Kyla with the camera, later using it to knock her out as she pins her to the floor. Soon the police arrive and Chris tends to his daughter before she's taken away in an ambulance. Kyla is also being taken in another ambulance and presumably arrested for her various crimes. However, the movie ends sometime later with a hooded figure appearing outside Chris and Riley's house as Riley is leaving for her first day of college while Chris is on his first day at a new school. The appearance implies that Kyla escaped from custody and maintained her heel persona while also planning to continue pursuing her obsession. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.